Buckle up. Welcome to Musicians and Beyond special multi-part series Under the Covers with Ernie Cefalu. Your hosts John Sarabian and Mark Lawhorn are going to expose the history-making journey of this iconic figure and his contributions to the music and corporate world. And today with Ernie, we're going to be talking about some really interesting stuff. We're going to be getting into the politics of the art and how sometimes the record labels themselves were the biggest competition and the biggest problem of trying to get some things done. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode with Ernie.
You know, we talked about on part 10, the biggest competition come from the record labels, but also, you know, the corporate that were done for different clients. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. I mean, when you blow it up, unfortunately, I wanted to show a variety of things rather than just put one thing up there and talk about, you know, I mean, how much can you talk about one piece? Well, right. I could go on for hours, but, you know, you'll lose all your viewers, man, for sure. You're talking about working with the corporate clients and how it differed and the people and, you know, how all that worked. And, you know, we certainly didn't have client with an art department, but we did have clients that had other agencies that they were using, you know, and for example, Nestle, they did the Butterfinger thing over here, give them the finger Butterfinger. That was an interesting story. I worked for Nestle for 30 years and I started out a guy who we first called on. I had a sales guy that worked for Pacific Eye and Ear, and his wife made jewelry. She made these safety pin bracelets on elastic that could stretch and stuff. Anyway, she met this woman at a show that they were selling all that kind of stuff. And this woman, they started talking, and what do you do? Oh, I work for Nestle. What do you do? Well, my husband works for an ad agency. Oh, really? Well, you should have him call on me. And at that time, we're in LA, and Nestle's headquarters, not the main headquarters in Switzerland, but the North America headquarters was in Glendale. So she said, well, have your husband call on me, you know? So we got a chance to call on Nestle, and we made the appointment. And then it was like a couple-week wait, and they're in the 18 stories building, and they have every floor, and it's just like going to the Wizard of Oz, and you see this big, grandiose thing, you know, and you're these little guys. And so we met with, she had left. She went to a different division, and the guy that took her place agreed to see us, okay? And he was in charge of the Contadina pastas and sauces. That was one of their brands. And they were doing a Chicago marathon. They were a sponsor. They would do this big spaghetti feed the night before the race. We had a chance to, he really liked the fact that we had done all the record stuff. He was very straight. This guy looked like a narc, okay? He was straight looking, you know, intimidating just to look at him. He was that straight looking. But what we didn't know was at night when he went home, he would take off the suit, put on his headband, plug in his lava lamp, and light up his bong and listen to the Grateful Dead. He was a huge Deadhead freak, right? But during the day, it was like Superman, Clark Kent and Superman. And we didn't know that. We come to find that out later on in the relationship. But he really loved our work, and he gave us the Chicago Marathon to do for Contadina pastas and sauces. So we did all this great stuff. It did really, really well. And he was really happy, and he was leaving that division, the pastas and sauces, and going to acquisitions, where Nestle would buy other companies and fold them into their portfolio of food products. And it's an amazing company. It's the largest food company in the world. When you go into a major grocery store, they own about 3,000 SKUs in that store, all under different Bosch and Lomb, all these different waters. And, you know, it's amazing. It's an amazing company. And so the guy that took his place was in charge of doing something for Butterfinger because they were losing market share. They were like a 30 million, well, no, they were more than that, but they were a sleepy brand. Butterfinger had been around forever. They weren't competing with Hershey. They weren't doing any of that. And they had used Bart Simpson, and that really spiked the brand. Butterfinger, he became the spokesperson for Butterfinger, Bart Simpson, because the guy that was the brand manager before our guy knew the guy that created The Simpsons. And they were on the Tracy Ullman show. They were little bumper spots on the Tracy Ullman show, The Simpsons. And so he cut a deal with the guy that created The Simpsons to have Bart Simpson be the spokesperson for Butterfinger. And that took off like crazy. I mean, he was just huge. And there was this meeting, I guess, about I don't know, 6 months later after he started being the spokesperson.
Ernie, that's kind of surprising in a way because some people could look at Bart Simpson as, a controversial character.
Right? There was this controversy about in corporate that Bart Simpson was an underachiever and not represented well for the Nestle brand of products because they were higher end, sophisticated, quality control, and this kid was an underachiever and just not representational of their company at all. So they were talking about getting rid of him, right? And until the CFO showed this guy the profit that they were making on Bart Simpson being a spokesperson. So they forgot about what they stood for and went for the money. Okay. At the end of the contract that this original brand manager had signed, he moved on and my guy took over the brand. And as soon as they got rid of Bart Simpson, the Simpson people wanted to negotiate a new deal. Nestle didn't feel that they needed it. Okay. They didn't need Bart Simpson. The brand was already doing great. It was like moved up like 20, 30 spots. It was right up there with Hershey, major competitor. And so they didn't think that they needed it. And Bart Simpson people wanted more money and it just didn't happen. So they got rid of it and the brand started declining. And that's when my guy took it over. And he said, we got to come up with something that's going to really sort of got to be known. It's got to be out there. It's got to talk to these young consumers. We need something. So I came up with this idea that during spring break, MTV was huge. Now this goes back, I don't know, 20 years. Bart Simpson had left. The brand was declining, but they needed an idea. How do we reach all these young people? We don't have a huge budget. So I was a big MTV fan because of all the videos and stuff and the music part of it. And so I came up with this idea to do a T-shirt, do a logo called Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger.
I love it.
Right? Which was because in those days, punk was really coming in. And when you go to a concert, I had a tenant who had a young son and he didn't want to go to these concerts. He's at the Whiskey and places like that. This kid was like 14 or 15, wanted to go to these concerts and the father didn't want to go. So I went with him. And it was amazing because, these bands would come out and everybody would be like, hey, hey. When I was younger, this meant let's go outside and square off and I'm going to knock your block off. Now it meant, hey, man, we love you guys. You guys are awesome. You're the bomb. This was a whole different meaning. And so I came up with this idea of Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger. And my guy loved it. But when he showed it to corporate, they freaked out. They said, no, we can't do that. Because the idea was to go to Florida where spring break was and MTV was covering it. And everybody's watching. We're going to give the shirts out for free and have all these people with Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger on television. It was a great idea and free publicity. All we had to do was, a couple thousand shirts and just give them out free. And the kids are going to wear them. It's got a great attitude. It's this. And that's what they're into. And corporate freaked out. But we did do, I think, 60 shirts and they all went to the executives, but they never did.
So it was too controversial for them.
It still is. They tried Follow the Finger. They did a campaign where you would follow this animated finger and it would take you to these, different experiences and stuff. And then nobody better lay a finger on my Butterfinger. And, they've done everything but Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger because it's too controversial and it definitely freaks them out. But that's what we needed. That's what they needed to really get some. I mean, it would have been free publicity and, it would have been all over TV. I mean, that was MTV. Yeah. That was the mentality. And that's who they were trying to hit. But
that was the perfect target audience for them to hit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was, and spring break in Florida, televised on MTV, all over MTV. It was, and you got to remember, MTV was the hot thing. There wasn't a whole lot of competition. They were the place, and now it's all different. They got into reality shows and all that. It's a whole different thing. But they ended up finding out that they needed to bring that music piece back because that was really their audience. Nobody gave a shit about the reality show.
Yeah.
Didn't really do that well. That wasn't who they were. So, there was that. Then there's a few other things here. We have the Hub logo, which was a project that I did for Coca-Cola. This little company in where are they? They're in Atlanta. They're in Atlanta. They have their own zip code, Coca-Cola. That's how big they are in Atlanta. It was huge. And the guy that one of the guys that I worked with at Nestle. That was one of the cool things about corporate. It was a lot like record business where as Alice got more and more popular, he took us with him. And the fact that we were doing stuff and his manager would direct people to us, he would direct people to us. You got to talk to Pacific Guy in here. You need an album cover. Those are the guys you talk to. So we got a lot of business like this. The guy that turned out to be the brand manager at Coca-Cola was a guy that I had worked with at Nestle. He left Nestle and went to Coca-Cola, brought us with him. And they wanted to do, and this is probably, 12, 15 years ago. They had these areas in shopping malls and in a couple of airports where people could go. It was like a Coca-Cola area. Had all this signage. You felt like you were in a Coca-Cola commercial. And it was bright and all that stuff. And they would let you charge your phones, and sort of get on the internet and stuff. And it was really limited. It wasn't very inviting. Called the hub, and it connecting you to the world. And what it became was this experience. There were big screens with projections on them. People would submit videos, and if they were cool enough, we would put them up in these centers. It was an experience, an entire physical experience that was in a pretty good size shape. We actually built one. They built one in St. Louis or someplace, but then the whole industry and the economy kind of hit the dumper at that time, and they stopped building them. But they did build one, and it was really beautiful. And I should have added some pictures, but that's the logo we did for it, called the Hub, and connecting you to the world. And so you're going and you're getting more. You're seeing videos. You're able to do stuff on your phone, interact with this whole experience. It was like a circus tent with these 3 or 4 different areas where you could go and things were projected and videos that people would submit, because that was a big thing, still a big thing. People put viral stuff up, of shit that they've created, so this was a way to get it aired under the Coca-Cola banner. So we got just a ton of stuff submitted, really cool stuff that people created, and like I said, we did one, and then the economy took a dump. And it's funny like that. Not very many things last a long time. They kind of come and go. I mean, that's one of the great things about working with Alice and Black Oak, Arkansas, and some of these other companies. I worked for Nestle for 30 years. That's a long time. I was the smallest agency on their authorized vendor list of agencies. And the big agencies hated us because we were taking work away from them, because they would sell, they would push what they knew the client would buy. They didn't want to do anything extra. They didn't want to do anything out of the box. And these marketing people were looking for that. They were looking for this disruptive, out of the box thinking. So we became very competitive. In fact, at one point we rented an office space at about half a block from their headquarters in Glendale. And my partner and I would make bets on who could walk through the building and come out the other side with the most work. Because that's what we do. We just go to each one of the floors, and they had 6 divisions there, and we were doing work for 5 of the 6. And so, we'd come back with 4 and 5 projects at a time, and we do that pretty much 2 or 3 times a week because we were right there. And then the clients would come over. We rented this building that was built by Frank Lloyd Wright Jr. It was a pyramid, and we rented it. It was just about a half a block from their office headquarters in Glendale. It was great. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was like the record business in the fact that they wanted something different, but it was unlike the record business where they had marketing people and branding people and all these people that wanted to be able to add their 2 cents to it, to be able to say, see that, I did that. I did that. There was a lot of that because they were all marketing people. They didn't have any art people. They didn't have any, they were buying all that outside. I think there were 14 of us, 14 agencies, and we were the smallest. There were big agencies like McCann Erickson, Neil Burnett, Shia Day, and we were, taking work away from them, which was great. I loved doing that. Loved being the sugar in their gas tank, and it would make them try harder too, but and I tried working for a big agency. It's not good. Too many levels of people that have egos or don't think that the client. I worked in a place where the sales guy would take what you did over to the client, and then he, with the client, would sort of change it all. And then he'd come back and say that the client wanted it, when actually he was influencing the client who was listening because he was the sales guy. Gotcha. And it was just so political, and the one thing about Pacific Guy here was we were never political, and I guess it was because we just didn't We didn't do that. We just didn't do it. It's not welcome. And even when we got bigger, we tried to. I think we got up to like 11 people at one time, and there's just too many. But then the other thing that we see over here, so you see down here this race car that we did for Alltech Lansing. The girl that's standing next to the car is Cindy Wood. She was Playmate of the Year in 1976, and she was, if you remember, in Apocalypse Now, when the helicopter lands and these girls get out in the cowboy outfits with the guns. She was the main girl there.
Okay.
And we hired her to be Miss Volk Speaker. And because we did this line of speakers, I told you with JBL coming back to Alltech, we called them the Volk Speakers, and we ripped off all the look and feel for the gray advertising Volkswagen campaign, where the Volkswagen ads were very famous. There was a full page ad, and 2/3 of the ad would be a photograph, and then the bottom third would be type. And the photograph would be things like they'd show this beautiful black and white, beautiful Volkswagen from the side, and it was called Lemon. And it was to talk about how this car, even though it looks beautiful, there was a flaw, and it never went out of the shop. And so we did the same thing where we did 2/3 photograph, 1/3 type, and we called it Turkey. And we had this beautiful bookshelf speaker there, but there was a flaw in it, so it never hit, and we just knocked their shit off for like a year. And then they hit us with a cease and desist, right? Because they had trademarked that look and feel, and we had knocked it off. But by that time, we stopped doing it and apologized. It's always better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, And it was cool because the guys at Alltech that we were working for, they were as crazy as we were. They loved the stuff that we were doing, and the crazier the better. So it was very much, it was the first real, Alltech Lansing was the first real ad agency account that Pacific Ioneer had. We had it from like 1974 to 1977. And then, change happened and everybody went their separate ways. And we went on to Sherwin Vega, and we went on to JBL and a few other beaker companies and case companies like Anvil and stuff. So we kind of stayed close to stuff that was low-hanging fruit from our music background. It really was a good thing for us to do because we had equity there. Mm-hmm. So that race car, we designed that with all these spoilers and stuff. And you got to remember, there was no Porsches that looked like that. We designed it all, and they actually made it. And we built that because the guy who was the assistant marketing guy who turned us on, we had met him through a Black Oak, Arkansas thing that endorsement. He was working for a kickbox company for guitar players, and they were doing an endorsement with Black Oak, Arkansas. And they said, yeah, we'll do the endorsement. You got to deal with our agency. Right here, turned out that this guy that we dealt with, Rich Mandela, was one of the first roadies that the Rolling Stones used when they came to America for the first time. And he knew all of them. And when he called on us at Pacific Ioneer, it was like, oh my God, you're the guy that did Rolling Stones time. I was their first roadie. So we hit it off really well. And he owned this Porsche, this 914 Porsche. We had enough budget to build all the spoilers and stuff for it. That they ended up using, Porsche, the 914 ended up using a lot of that same stuff. And just because we didn't patent it or trademark it, right. We just did it and they built it. And we had a very little budget, and we did a poster called The Speed of Sound. It was with Cindy, and then when we'd go to shows, and we went to the IMSA series, and we would bring out big speakers and play rock and roll and have that car there with Cindy and other girls, like my wife Bonnie and some other girls that were wives of the guys, and they'd dress up in these jumpsuits. We created jumpsuits and posters and everything for this. And we never raced the car because we didn't have enough money to put an engine in it. It just looked really good, but it never ran. But it didn't matter because we were stealing. Camel was the sponsor for the IMSA series. They would end up bringing their girl and their car over to our area because we'd have hundreds of people standing around getting posters, waiting for these girls to sign them and looking at the car. I mean, it was really unique, even though we never raced it. It was really crazy. But again, being disruptive, we only had enough money to make it look good. And, that's all that mattered.
It worked.
And then, yeah, it worked. It really worked. I mean, that they were getting letters, dear people, because our tagline was, it was the Volk speakers. They were speakers for people from the people at Alltech Lansing. Okay, just like the Volkswagen was the people's car, we were the Volk speaker, which was the people's speaker from the people at Alltech Lansing. They were getting stacks of mail. Dear people at Alltech Lansing, we love your product. We did, and I mean, it was amazing. And it was like, again, it was like the record business where you do something for Alice Cooper, the next thing you know, it's big and everybody's looking at it. And it was that same kind of thing that happened for Alltech and what we were doing. And then the guy that was the president of Alltech, this guy, William Garman, he was the largest stockholder in Alltech. And he was the president. He was in charge of, they had 3 divisions. He had bankrupted 2 of the other divisions and took over the speaker division. And he was a Bible Belt guy who carried a Bible with him everywhere. Okay. And very conservative. And everything was kind of going along pretty good until we did the floor standing speakers. And we decided that we were going to do a deal with Hustler magazine, because the audience, these guys that were buying Hustler and Playboy and all those were buying, speakers that were $500, $600 a piece. So we started running ads there. And this guy Garman he opened up a Hustler magazine, and on the right side is this naked beaver shot, and on the left side is their ad. And he went crazy. I mean, he went crazy. He fired everybody, fired all of us. And then about 6 months later, he blew his brains out in the parking lot of Alltech.
Jesus.
But it was too late. Everybody had gone. We went on to Sir Vega. We went on to a couple other companies, Alta, JBL. My first partner told me, even though you love them, and I did, I would always go, I love these guys. This is great. It's never going to last forever. It'll never last forever. And so you got to learn that. And he taught me that, because I thought, we got them. They love it. We love them. They love us. I'm in a 56-year relationship with my wife. She loves me. I love her. It's great. But it doesn't work like that in business. People come, people go, they come in, have their own people. It's kind of crazy how all that kind of works. And you have to get through that. When I had Panavision for 9 years through 3 regimes, which was unheard of. 3 separate regimes. And then finally they hired a guy from Schick Razor, who was a marketing guy. And I swear to God, I sat in a conference, this big conference room. Every time we did something for them, we'd frame it and hang it in their conference room. So we're in this huge conference room with all our stuff all over the walls that had really got them happening. I mean, they were losing market share. The guy that owned the company that sold it to Warner Brothers was like the guy that ran Studio 54. If he didn't like you, you didn't get to rent one of his cameras. Go to Aeroflex, go to Mitchell. You can't rent one of mine. And it really hurt Panavision. And when he got killed, his gay lover killed him, and it was all this cocaine and stuff. And Warner Brothers had just bought the company. And so Jack Holzman, the guy who started Elektra Records, sold Elektra Records to Warner Brothers. It became Warner Elektra Asylum. Mm-hmm. And they put Jack on the board of Kenny, which owned all of it. And so when Frank Gottschalk got killed, they needed somebody to run the company. So they put him in charge, Jack Holzman. And the first thing he did was called us, because we had worked with him in the record business, and gave us the account. Awesome. That was the second big corporate account that we had. Panavision. It was like having Rolls Royce, but they never sold the car. You could walk in there with $1 million. You couldn't buy one piece of equipment, one nut or bolt. They don't sell. They only lease. And there's a huge cage area where they have all this equipment, and it's all tagged and stuff. And there are different cinematographers and different directors who aren't doing a movie currently, but they don't want anybody to have that equipment. They used it. They love it. It's theirs. They pay rent on it every month, and it sits there until they get another production that then they get it. It's a very strange company.
Is it still that way today?
Oh yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Lee Lighting bought them, and Lee Lighting was lenses and filters. Lee Filters. It was a big company. They owned like 50 different companies in the movie business, along with a couple of big movie studios in England and stuff. And they bought Panavision, and then they got caught manipulating stocks. The stock market hit the dumper, and they got busted, so they had to sell off a lot of stuff. And then the bean counters took it over. I don't know who owns it now, but we worked for them for 9 years. It was a great piece of business, and we really helped turn that company around. We did some great stuff, and we'll do a show at one point with that stuff because it's really amazing. And again, it's such a prestigious company. I mean, in the industry, if you're doing a production that's got a Panavision camera on it, it's a real thing. Okay, that's the reputation they have. And they do that because they control everything. If they have a camera that becomes obsolete, they recycle everything. They rebuild it into something brand new. It's a pretty amazing company. And it was a great honor to have them. And it's funny because when we first got the account, we got the account, and a kid that was working with me, we decided we were going to get mohawks. So we started drinking vodka at like 7 a.m. And by 11 o'clock, we were stewed. And my wife had her hairdresser come over, and he gave us mohawks. Well, 2 days later, we're invited to this Panavision party where they're celebrating, the Panavision and the new team, and we were invited. So he and I show up with these mohawks on and stuff. I mean, it was just, and I'm looking at the guy that's the marketing director. And this guy looks really familiar. And it turns out, make a long story short, you remember Wavy Gravy and the Hog Farm in New York? The ones that were involved with Woodstock and stuff? Yeah. Wavy Gravy and Hog Farm, Merry Pranksters, all those. Well, he was Captain Gas. He was the nitrous guy. And when you get the Hog Farm book and you open it up, he's on the first page with his hands on his hips like a superhero and these nitrous tanks on his back. He was Captain Gas. And it was great. I mean, it was a great account, and they loved the stuff that we did. And like I said, they hired this guy. Years later, they hired this guy from Chick Razor. We're sitting in this conference room, and he's telling me about how all the stuff that we had done isn't really relevant. It's really not that great. And that, we're no longer going to be the agency. That's how we were let go. There was a different owner now. Mm-hmm. And it was cruel. But, again, what goes around comes around. This guy took the account, brought in his own agency. 3 years later, he got busted for taking kickbacks from the agency. They prosecuted him and threw him in jail. So, it all seems to balance out in the end. And then the last thing, I went to work with one of the guys that was at Nestle, went over to InBev, which is the largest beer company. They own everything. Specs, Stella Artois, 29 beer brands.
They bought Budweiser in the last few years, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bought part of it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they own everybody. I mean, it's really amazing. And I was working with them for 3 years before they sold it to the Brazilians. The Brazilians bought it, and I think they sold it again. But the people in Belgium, the Belgians owned it when we were working there. And the guy that I'd worked with at Nestle, they took me to Kmart. Then he took me here, and we did all the promotions for Beck's and Bass and Stella Artois. And, it was a great account. And again, like when I send you these, you'll see there's some Mardi Gras, a lot of stuff that we did, all their promotions and stuff, a lot of advertising. We worked for them for 3 years. And then again, like everything else, you build up this brand, they think they can handle it. So they get rid of you. They got rid of everybody. They fired him. They fired us. It was all just this big political setup too, the way it all came down, but again, nothing lasts forever. And, it's a hard thing to accept because you think if you can build something on friendship, you can build something that's really good, that it would just keep on going, but it doesn't. It just never does. No matter how good it is, there'll always be somebody that comes in and wants to change it or bring their own people in or whatever.
Yeah. Politics seem to take.
Yeah. Yeah, politics is huge, especially in everything. It's politics.
Politics and personalities, it's
egos. Yeah. Egos. I mean, it was. It's a crazy business, the creative business. I never thought that I would ever make a career out of doing this. I never did. I mean, I always loved art, but I never realized that somebody would pay me money to sit and do it. I mean, a lot of people were just like, well, you get to sit around and color things and draw and stuff all day. That's not working, And I'm like, okay, yeah, here's a pen and paper. You do it.
Right.
Well, no, that's why we're coming to you. Well, okay, then respect the fact that, when I do something, there's 53 years of experience that goes into what I do. I just don't pull it out of my left ear. It has 53 years worth of education that goes into what I end up doing. And, it's interesting to see how people react to that. Some people understand it, respect it. Other people go, well, I can get this guy over here is $20 cheaper. Okay, go over there. Go over there. It's fine. I don't need it. If you want to give, I just went through a thing like that with these guys that had a movie they did. It's an indie movie, and it's pretty good. I mean, after you watch it, you want to kill yourself. But other than that, it's okay. It's a real depressing film, and with a happy ending. It's like right as you decided to jump off the building and you're in mid-flight, they decide to make it an uplifting thing, but it's too late. You're going to hit the ground. It's done. You've committed, and so they wanted it for a very cheap price. They asked us how much we wanted. I'll do it for $10,000. Okay. And that's cheap when it comes to movie posters. I mean, most movie posters are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Even indie film. A kid that used to work for me owns BLT, the largest movie poster design company in the country. And they charge anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 for a poster. But it's minimal compared to the money they spend on making a movie. You spend $30 million making a movie, $100,000.
Percentage-wise,
yeah, because they get the poster, they get the campaign, they get everything. So when I told this guy 10, he said, "Well, I was sort of hoping you'd do it for 5." And I said, "Well, you can keep on hoping, but the least I can do is for 8." "Oh yeah, okay." And he had me talk to the girl that's financing it. And it was, yeah, sure, okay. And then I never heard from him again. And then she just called me up the other day and said, "Well, if you can do it for 6." I said, "I can't, I can barely do it for 8. There's no way. Go to the other people. I know he's looking for other people. He's found somebody. Go to them." I just can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't care, because when you do those kinds of things, you end up eating it in the long run. That kind of a piece of business ends up being like, "Okay, look, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I want to get this over with. I want to get whatever money I can get, and you go your way and I go my way before we start hating each other."
Right.
And now I'll get into that before I even get started. I mean, I've been doing this so long that as soon as they say the wrong word, that's all it takes, one word. Mm-hmm. And it's usually like, "Man, we're going to have so much fun. We're going to have so much fun doing this." And what they're really saying is, "We're going to have so much fun taking advantage of you. You don't even know what hit you." That's what they mean.
And you're in a great position now, Ernie, that you can pick and choose and take what you want.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. I really am. I mean, my wife, thank God for her. She's a business part of this, and she made the right investments, and she did it all. I mean, if it wasn't for her, I'd be living in a cardboard box. Seriously. I mean, I just give everything away, and it's taken me years. First of all, it's taken me years to believe that I'm really good. Okay, and as a creative person, no matter what you do, you always have this fear of not being good. There's somebody that's out there, and it's like being a gunslinger in the Old West. You could be the fastest guy ever, but there's always going to be one. There's always going to be a young one that comes up and is going to be able to be faster than you, just a hair second faster.
Now, Ernie, through this series, we've talked a lot about the things you've done over the career, and one of the things we ask when we're doing a music podcast and with our guests, we'll ask them if they had any advice for young people coming into the industry or someone starting new. I have an idea of what you'd say. Along the way, we've talked about disruption. We've talked about, take chances, go the extra mile, marry the right person, but
make friends with the right person.
Right, exactly. Timing, you've mentioned timing.
Timing is huge.
What's another piece of advice outside of what we've just mentioned that you'd offer someone and say, this is really sage advice that I would follow?
You can't even tell them to be a doctor anymore because they're so frustrated with corporate America running everything. So that's out. I've been asked that question before. It's a good question. What I would suggest is take some business classes. Take a basic law class. Okay, it's important that what rights you have when you create stuff, because just because you create it don't mean you own it, and that happens a lot. That's happened to me. Where I've created it, other people take it and use it, and I have no recourse because I don't own it. A record company owns it, or this or that. Luckily, I was able to. My partner Tony was smart at that. We made stickers that said this artwork is exclusive property of some guy here. Otherwise, the record companies were taking it, like we talked about. Different art directors would take it, and get taken advantage of a lot. I was lucky in my collection because of the pieces I have, because everybody was work for hire. So I own it all. But I would definitely take legal class, understand what rights you have as a creative person. You can do that at a junior college. You don't have to go to Stanford or anything like that, but you should have that knowledge. They don't teach you that in art school.
Right.
I spent 5 years in art school. Nobody's ever asked me for my degree. I got a BFA, graduated top of my class. Nobody's ever asked me. You know what they say? Here's a pencil and paper. There's a desk. Sit down and tell us what you do if this was the problem. Give us a solution. I don't care about your degree. I don't care about I don't care about your portfolio, because I don't know how long it took you to do that. It's really great, but it could have taken you much longer than I have a budget to afford.
Right.
So tell me what you would do and make it relevant. And that's always been, it's been my case. It's like timing. It's always been, okay. And the portfolio helped a bit because it got me in the door, but it didn't get me the job. What got me the job was the solution that I could provide. Okay. And then later on, the knowledge that I would have about what I created came harder because it cost dearly. A couple of major lawsuits that, thank God, I had the best attorney in the state of California that I won. But it's still, there's certain things that I just can't do because it could be. And it hasn't, knock on wood, up to this point, ever been an issue, but it could be. And, there's so many, the law was great up until 1976 for creative people. Then they changed it. And now it sucks. It really sucks. So, and especially if you're a freelancer, it's different if you're doing it for yourself or you have a company that people are doing it with you, like I did. I had 5 illustrators, full time. So all that work that was created was owned by Pacific Pioneer, which I owned because I owned the company. So it was all work for hire. Had any of it been freelance, I wouldn't own it. And it's still kind of questionable about every album cover I ever did had a copyright line on, from the record company. So that means, what do they own? Do they own the music? Do they own, no, the musicians own the music. Do they own the artwork? Well, that's kind of questionable because it does have a copyright on that piece of art that we created and provided. So, it's kind of iffy. Luckily, I don't think record companies are looking at me. I'm kind of low-hanging fruit. And I have artwork. So my main thing is, I can sell some prints, but I really want to sell the artwork. The artwork is where the money is.
Yeah.
And the fact that when we did it originally, it was $3,500 and now it's worth $150,000. That's retribution for all those years,
Right.
And luckily I have, a couple of people that appreciate it and want it. So good position.
Yeah, excellent.
So legal advice is definitely critical. Even if you don't take a business class, you're going to go to work for somebody, you should know what your rights are. You should know what you create. If you're a freelancer, you own it. If you work for them, it's work for hire, you don't own it. It's important. It's important to know that. I hope that answered.
That's a fantastic answer to
protect your industry, protect your creativity, and
because everybody needs the idea. Without the idea, all they have, or the look and feel, all they have is something that needs to be sold to other people. It needs to be branded. It needs to be packaged. It needs to be messaged. They can't do that. They created the product. So they come to us, and then all of a sudden they own all of it. Mm-hmm. Well, wait a minute. How did that happen? Well, we paid you, and you were freelance and we own it. It's our brand. It's our product. We paid you. You took the money, and then you're screwed, So, I wish that, and it's so funny because there isn't one art school in the country that has legal classes.
I think it sounds like it should be a major...
mandatory. It should be a mandatory class that you need to take as a creative person, whether you're a sculptor, an illustrator, a designer, whatever, jeweler. You need to know that stuff, and they don't teach it.
Right.
They just don't teach it.
Unfortunately, some of these people might just find out the hard way. They'll do something.
I found out the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first event, my first learning experience cost $33,000.
It's a very expensive lesson.
Yeah. Well, it got me off cheap because they were suing me for $325,000. And they didn't do anything except create a bunch of stuff illegally. So, it was a long story, but, in the end, my attorney wrote 3 letters. They dropped everything, surrendered $50,000 worth of merchandise that they had created illegally, and they surrendered $40,000 worth of framing and matting that they had done, and tried to steal some pieces. It was gnarly, and all he did was write 2 letters, and they dropped everything and gave me all the stuff. And, that's the kind of attorney you need. It's $1,100 an hour, but, it's worth it.
Worth it, yeah.
And I learned the hard way. Luckily, all that they were so sure that they were going to win the lawsuit because we had a contract and they were limited to what they could do, but they were so sure that they were going to win that they listed everything that they had created illegal to justify the $325,000 total amount. So when they lost, they had already, I had no idea, that they had done that. And when it was listed, it was like, wait a minute, they can't do that. They didn't have the rights to do that. And so, but they were sure that I didn't own the rights. I owned the piece. They knew that, but there's a difference between owning the piece and owning the rights.
Mm-hmm.
What they didn't know was that it was all work for hire, so I own all the rights as well. So that my attorney wrote, like I said, a couple letters, and $33,000, and I ended up selling most of the stuff and make the money back. So it wasn't a bad experience, but it took a toll physically. It took a toll mentally and physically to be involved in a lawsuit like that.
Right.
It took 2 years. It was just nuts. It was nuts, and a lot of stress and pressure that you don't need. So take some law classes. You can get them easy. You can go, City College. They don't charge you. You can get a couple of basic law classes so you know what you have, what your rights are. And as a creative, I give that advice to whoever asked me that.
Yeah.
And I have been asked that. I mean, it's an important question to ask and an important answer to understand.
Sure. Absolutely.
So anyway, that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I like the
advice.
conversation today. I like the content, everything that you've discussed.
Well, I like you guys.
There was some new stuff that you brought in today that we had not seen or heard. So great stuff.
Okay, and we'll do it again. And there's still a whole bunch more stuff to talk about.
And that's what we want.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
We're really getting under the covers with Ernie Cefalu.
Yeah, man, I'm ready. I'm nice and toasty under here. I like being nice and toasty. All right, well, listen, guys, have a great day. Thank you so much for everything.
Always. You're the best.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have
guys.
a good day, buddy.
We'll talk to you
Bye-bye.
soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.